What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Overwatch League fan thoughts and analysis for the Season 2 rosters. Today we will be going over the Los Angeles Gladiators, the fourth overall team by record during the regular season, the second overall team from the Pacific Division, and one of the most improved teams from last year. However, a big part of that improvement, Fissure is no longer on the team. Obviously, he is a member of the Soul Dynasty. We have talked about him many times on this channel. He is a very good player. And when you look at what this team is now versus what they were with Fissure, slightly different, of course. So let's get into this team. What does this team look like now when compared to the way this team looked with Fissure? Now, this team did lose some players, but not a ton. You have Fissure being the main loss, and I don't want to make it sound like none of the other players that this team lost were any good. But at the end of the day, I think that the loss of Fissure is ultimately the biggest loss, and ultimately the loss that is going to have the biggest impact on this team. They lost iRemix, who was their other tank player. He is no longer on the team. He's a loss, yes, but they brought in Fissure to replace iRemix for a reason. So take that as you will. And then Asher, also they got rid of. Asher was never incredible. He played decently at times, but he was never a player who kind of wowed me. And then you have Silk Thread, who also never really wowed me. He was pretty good. He spent some time with the LA Valiant, then went to the LA Gladiators, and then he was released, had signed with the Chengdu team before actually retiring from the league. So that is where they stand with what they've lost. Two of those players, Silk Thread and Asher, were DPS players, so they're down two DPS players. They still keep their main two being Surefour and Hydration. We'll start with Surefour. Very good Widowmaker player. Won the Widowmaker duels during the All-Star weekend, which was impressive. Obviously, he is this team's main hit scan player, so you can hear that car or motorcycle, whatever the hell it is out there. I don't even know what it is. But he is a Canadian player, was on the Canadian World Cup team all 3 years of the World Cup. Surefour is a very good player. He's consistent. He had one of the greatest moments in competitive Overwatch history, potentially, with the big debate during the playoffs against the London Spitfire when he hid in the spawn room, and then the rest of his team went out. He hid in the spawn room as Brigitte and then switched over to Widowmaker and picked the rest of the London Spitfire off while his team took the point. It was a very big moment. But not Hydration. Surefour is a very good player. He was very consistent. He can play other heroes, but Widowmaker's who is mostly playing, and who I expect he will continue to mostly play. But he can play some Tracer, he can play some Sombra, McCree, Soldier 76, stuff like that. I 100% expect to continue to see Surefour dominate like he did in Season 1. Next, we have Hydration, who is another very good player, and I really like watching Hydration play. Played a lot of really great Pharah, played a lot of really great Doomfist. I really like what he brings to this team. He played for the US World Cup team. He's an impressive player, and he impressed me week in and week out, honestly. I definitely think he improved throughout the season. I thought that there were times when he didn't look amazing. He got subbed in and out quite a bit for a while, but by the end of the season, Hydration was a staple for this team. You know, maybe you bring in Silk Thread every once in a while, but Hydration was on this team pretty much every game at the end of the season. He's a very good player. his Pharah and Doomfist, with how big those have been recently. I expect to see him play a lot still. He can play some Genji. He's got a good hero pool, and he's a fun player to watch. He played some of the best Doomfist, I think, in all of Season 1, so I'm hoping we get to see some more fun play from him. But then we get to the new addition on the DPS roster, and that is Decay. Decay comes from Kongdu Panthera. We're back to the Kongdu Panthera players, as we covered in the Shanghai Dragons video, the very first one of these I made. Decay is one of those players from Kongdu Panthera. He's also going to have some of that Tracer. He also has some Widowmaker, some Genji. I don't know how often he'll play. I really think it depends on what the meta is looking like. I tend to believe, in most cases, with some of these teams that have had success recently, or had success in Season 1, like the LA Gladiators, especially like they had late in the season, I tend to believe that these players that have that experience, that were on the team in Season 1, will continue to be their starters, with some exceptions, of course. Players that are younger, maybe that can take over some of that spot. But I expect Hydration and Surefour to be the starters. I expect Decay to be a player that they bring in when they need him. He's not old enough to play in Stage 1, I don't believe, because his birthday is the end of February. And he's 17 currently, so he probably won't be able to play until Stage 2. So it will be interesting to see what he does when he can play. I don't know exactly the way the rules work. I don't know if it's you can't play until you turn that age, or if it's you just can't play until the stage after. But I'm interested to see what they do with Decay once he is 18 and is able to play. So don't expect to see him early in the season, but I do expect to see him late in the season a lot. Well, maybe not a lot, but a decent amount. I think he could very much be a player we see a lot late in the season, depending on where the meta is. That is it for the DPS players. Let's move on to the flex tank players, where we have Void and Bishu, a very interesting core. And the reason why I mention them both together, usually I talk about one and then the other, but Void and Bishu just kind of interchange a lot, and it's interesting. A lot of it comes down to, I think, Bishu's communication. Bishu speaks much better English, because I believe he has spent a lot of time in the U.S. I don't know if he was raised in the U.S. I really don't know, but Void and Bishu play pretty much the same hero pool. Void, I think, is just slightly better, but they're so close in skill that it comes down to, I think, at the end of the day, kind of what you need. Right? If you're having a breakdown in communication, then you're going to want Bishu, and Bishu is very valuable because he is bilingual, right? So if you have your Korean players and they need to be communicating more with the team, and there's that language issue, you can have Bishu, who can definitely be the translator. He can just, say whatever. He's a very interesting player for this team. He's one of my favorite players in the Overwatch League because, one, he's a very positive player, has a very positive energy. He's a very good guy, and from what I've seen, obviously, I've never met him, but from what you see of him, he's just very happy, and he also has that talent or that ability of being bilingual, which gives him a huge advantage in some ways. It's a big benefit to his team. He's a very nice player. These two players performed well last season. I don't really think there's going to be much change in the way they are used. I expect them to switch between them. I personally like Bishu better just because I think he's just I like him better as a personality, so I like him better. I like seeing him play more than I like seeing Void play. But to me, the two teams, or the two players, are about the same. Not really a lot, to me, that changes with the way this team plays depending on who's in. I think really that they have very, very interchangeable skill sets, and I think that that's a really good thing because you can build specific compositions around specific ones, specific players. I don't really know if one plays better in one way, one plays better in the other way. I didn't look at the numbers to see like if Bishu, was overwhelmingly playing one type of map, while Void was overwhelmingly playing another type of map and whatnot. I don't think I ever noticed anything like that or noticed any kind of comment on that. So I don't know, but I think the Gladiators are a good team with these two playing. I think these two do what they have to do. And Bishu is residing in Canada, not the United States, but the idea still stands. But yeah, I think these two players are good. I think they both do what this team needs. Really, all I can say. Next, we have the tank role, which is a very interesting role because obviously they are without Fissure. And when you don't have Fissure, that superstar player, that all-star player, you have to replace him, and you are very, very, very likely to replace him with someone that is not as good. Right? Fissure is that good of a player. The chances of you finding someone as good as Fissure, pretty low. So they looked to the sorry, I wasn't even hear that. Kongdu Panthera roster again, and they signed Roar, who also has history on the LW Blue roster, which is where a lot of the New York Excelsior players came from. Giannis, obviously he's no longer with the team, but Sabiolbi, Pine, Flower, all those guys, all came from that LW Blue, LW Red as well for some of them. Nene and Arc come from there. But the LW Blue roster was where you saw Sabiolbi, Meko, Giannis, Pine, Mono, and Jonak, and Flower. It's a very, very, very good history for Roar. He's played on some very good teams. Obviously, most recently, he played on the Kongdu Panthera team that got second place in Contenders Korea for Season 2 of the 2018 Contenders circuit. Roar's, I think, going to be a good player. He's not going to be a Fissure, and I don't think they expect him to be a Fissure. They expect him to be the player they need him to be. They expect him to be what they need out of a main tank. He is going to be playing every game, right? I think that is just the way it works, because they don't have the backup tanks. They only have one tank player, right? And it's him. It's Roar. So he's going to have to play a lot. He's going to have to play every game. And I think when you look at this team, they're going to have to rally around this new guy who's going to be their main tank player. Main tank's a very important position. He is their only one. If they were to look to kind of signing another player, I wouldn't be surprised if they look at a main tank, because that to me is the position that they will most likely need to look most into. So I'm excited to see what Roar does, but overall I think he's a good signing for this team, and I think he will be what they need. He won't be an upgrade over Fissure, but I think he is an upgrade over iRemix, and I think that Roar will be what you need in a main tank. If you don't have that superstar anymore. Next, we have the supports. We got 3 supports on this team. We have Shaz, who is Thayer Zenyatta. I think he's a good player. Comes from Finland. He was on Team Finland for the World Cup. I've enjoyed watching Shaz play. I think he is a pretty good player. And I haven't watched a game where I thought Shaz was inconsistent or a poor player. I think, especially as the season went on, I just think everyone on the team just kind of elevated their play and just got better. Pair him with Big Goose, also a Finnish player. He was their Mercy player. you had a very solid backline that could communicate well because they're both from the same country. Then you throw in now the third support player, which is Ripa or Ripa. I don't know really how you pronounce it. Who is also a Finnish player. He is Zenyatta Moira. He's that more offensive type of support player. I think you put these three together, I think you should have a very solid backline with your supports. I'm really liking what this team is, what they've put together. Obviously, they added new players with the intention, I would assume, of I think they added what they did purely with the idea that they would be able to have a communicating roster that does everything they need out of a backline. I'm like really just jumbling up my words and getting confused as to what I'm trying to say. But at the end of the day, I think they have what they wanted. They got what they needed most out of the support line. Now you're looking at a team that has two already established supports in Shaz and Big Goose. You got another who's young. He's only 18. He can do what you need a support player to do, and he can play some of those more offensive heroes in that support pool, mainly Zenyatta and Moira. I'm excited to see what he does, but once again, I don't expect him to play more than Shaz and Big Goose, or mainly Shaz, I think, is who he would be competing with. I think at the end of the day, most of these teams that made the playoffs last year are going to stick with their roster that got them to the playoffs. Why would you switch off of a set of players that already proved that they could get you there? So essentially what you're looking at is he will be fighting to take the job from Shaz. I assume it'll be Shaz that he's fighting with. And that's really it, right? If he can do it, good on him. Then he succeeded, and he deserves all of the praise. If he is unable to, well, he's a young guy, and he can continue to develop as a player. And maybe he's a good tool to have, a good player to trade or whatever. I think they're in a very good position. And I think that this team will be incredible, much like they were last season. Now, I don't think they will be necessarily as good. I think they're still a playoff team, especially with 8 teams in the playoffs. But we'll get more into that when we get to the end of this whole series of videos. But with that, that's all I have on the LA Gladiators. So, if you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing. Your support is greatly appreciated. Let me know down below what you think about the LA Gladiators in this video. I think it was a little bit shorter than usual, which is kind of my hope with a lot of these videos. I think it should be the trend that we see as we get towards the end of these playoff teams, with maybe the exception of the next one. But until then, we won't worry about it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next video, and have a good one.